Your company provides a great service to your customers. What advice can you give on how to balance between full-time employees and freelancers?
We have about 3/4 of our workforce today is freelancers. And that's been true basically since we were born as a small startup. We've always built our workforce as hybrid. And what we see today in the environment more broadly is a shift where more and more companies are looking critically at their full-time employee staff and realizing the limitations of what that staff can do for them. Often those people in their current payroll don't know how to use AI tools, aren't maybe moving fast enough up the learning curve, don't have other critical skills as these businesses are moving in a very dynamic environment. So that trend is causing more companies to have a smaller core FTE group and a larger group of contingent, freelance, and kind of third-party vendors that they work with. And that, I think, is an enduring shift we're going to keep seeing more of. So for every company, I think the key is moving from a mindset of, in the past, like most leaders have thought like, oh, I hire or I do work with the unit of the FTE. That's like the unit of measurement. Like I need to add these FTEs or subtract these FTEs. That's how work is comprised. The shift for leaders is to say, these aren't FTE units. Now it's skills or projects or efforts. And once we break down the work to be more clear about what those boundaries and goals are, we actually may not need a big team of 10 FTEs. Maybe we could have 4 or 5 specialists who really focus on that project, and then we keep going with them or disband it based on what we find. And so it's a different mindset around kind of what the unit of work is, how you define and scope the work, and then of course going to this tremendous pool of freelancers, which is a $1.3 trillion economy in the US alone, to find that skilled talent that you probably don't have to be moving fast enough and most agile, in this current environment.
And how do you go about defining the scope of a job so that you can decide, okay, it's a full-time employee or it's a freelancer? I mean, do you have a process that you use to get at that?
We do. I mean, we start with really what's the goal here and what's the time frame in which we need to achieve the goal? And is this something that's going to endure beyond that or not? We also look at aspects, of course, that are around kind of compliance and how much control and direction do we have to give to this work, or is it more kind of autonomous and we can share context and then have experts go off and do some of this work for them? So these are two of the factors that we look at in figuring out, can we do this with freelance talent? But for us, David, basically every question kind of starts with the premise like, why can't you do it with freelance talent? Like that's where we always start, is like, this should be something we can do with a flexible team. And if we really push ourselves to say, in places where people want more headcount, like, is that necessary? And they really have a high bar to justify in order to make that happen.
That makes sense. And as I said at the top of the show, you've been leading in this remote work environment before people even talked about remote work environments. And you've been doing this a long time. And it's now the new normal for every company. What advice would you give others on how to navigate this well? How do you really be a company that knows how to lead a remote workforce?
The first thing is, I think too often people mistake a remote first or remote forward workforce with we don't get together in person. When in fact, our model has always been a combination of, yes, lots of fully remote team members, lots of flexibility in terms of when, where, and how people work, but we still have strong cadences of getting teams together so they really build not just business context, but also social context and relationships. And that is really a huge unlock for remote teams. They have to have that as a foundation. So remote teams have to have a lot of in-person touch points. It can vary based on the team and the work, but that's a key part of relationship building. And then you also need to be very clear about what are the remote work practices. So for example, in our company, in every meeting, cameras are on for every participant. And that is really the guiding light as just one example, kind of practically, of how we ensure people are like seeing and hearing from each other, able to read body language. It's not about just dialing on the phone. You have to be like physically present. Those are some of the things that we do in addition to like weekly touch points where you build culture. You've got to build culture with a remote team that's not in the office. And for us, that means things like a half-hour touch point every week where we can put our culture on display, showcase work that's happening, create context, and also let people see and hear about things that are happening across the business that they're not hearing about when they're not in an office, which is what most of our team, is. So those are some of the things that really have helped us build remote culture and remote fabric. But every company has to approach this for like what's right for them.